welcome to Cashcroft TV. My name is Kalen Ashcroft. Thank you very much for watching this episode of Ages of Empires. Sorry that I am creating this within less than 24 hours since the most recent one. However, I had all the content prepared, and I'd like to live by Benjamin Franklin's philosophy, don't leave till tomorrow what can be done today. I remember reading through all of the major writings by Benjamin Franklin in Philadelphia, and if I could ever go back in time and tell him to what extent he has influenced my life, I could not even put it into words. So nonetheless, I try to live by that philosophy. Often I try to give also a book suggestion, so this is not a conventional one too. This is Tort Law, just a textbook that I'm having to read for my legal studies. This is by Weinrib, a very famous Canadian legal scholar. Nonetheless, tort law is pretty fascinating. It's there's civil disputes between people. Those are the most common cases that people are most familiar with, I guess, next to criminal law. That's essentially when people sue other people for damage to their property, for example, would be a nuisance claim. But nonetheless, that's just something I'm reading on the side while I also endeavor to learn more about history. So for this series, Ages of Empires, we will be going through all of the major world empires. Today we will be covering the Phrygian Empire and the 25th dynasty of Egypt Empire, also known as the Nubian Dynasty or the Kushite Empire. So for those of you who have followed the previous episodes on ancient Egypt, this one will fit in very nicely. So this dynasty is slightly different from the Old, Middle, and New Kingdoms of Egypt because it was a different people who ruled over Egypt for a time, so it is quite distinct. As for the Phrygian Empire, we have here written, it's actually Gordia, I believe, in the Greek characters, because Gordias was one of the famous kings of Gordia, and I suppose it was called Gordia for a time, and Gordion was in fact the capital. But nonetheless, we will also highlight two significant leaders from each respective empire in each episode. For today, we will be covering King Midas of the Phrygian Empire and Taharqa of the 25th dynasty of Egypt. And in the style of the most influential book in my life, Plutarch's Parallel Lives, we will have at the end of this episode a comparison between the two leaders to perhaps learn how to, at least for myself, how to live my life better, and perhaps maybe you too might be able to distill some lessons as well. So, without further ado, we will begin with the first empire and leader. So, the Kingdom of Phrygia was an ancient Anatolian state that emerged around the 12th century BCE and played a significant role in the early history of Asia Minor. Situated in what is now modern-day Turkey, Phrygia was a land of fertile valleys, rugged mountains, and strategic importance. This historical account, which we will cover, will trace the rise and the fall of Phrygia, delving into its origins, key rulers, cultural contributions, conflicts, and ultimate demise. So it's important to note that during the 8th century BCE, it, for example, it rivaled against Assyria and the Urartu empires, both of which we have covered previously. So if you have not checked those out, I hope you do so. And if you have, thank you very much. So as for early origins and formation of the Phrygian Empire from the 12th century to the 8th centuries BCE, so Phrygian origins. So the exact origins of the Phrygians remains debated among historians. Some suggest they were part of a larger Indo-European migration that swept through Anatolia. So as we covered in the Indus Valley Civilization, supposedly one of the causes of the decline of the Indus Valley Civilization was that this Indo-Aryan people left and moved northwest and perhaps swept through Anatolia, while others proposed they were an indigenous group already there. So there's two conflicting theories. Regardless of their origin, by the 12th century BCE, the Phrygians had established a distinct cultural identity. It's also important to note that according to Homer's Iliad, they fought in the Trojan War on the side of Troy, who ultimately were defeated by the Greeks, but the Phrygians were notable for fighting against the Achaeans, who were a Greek city-state, so deeply rooted in history. Moving to the legendary King Midas, who from circa 738 to 696 BCE. So one of the most renowned figures in Phrygian history is King Midas, whose reign is traditionally dated from 738 to 696 BCE. We'll cover this in more detail in a specific biography dedicated to him. Legend has it that he possessed the ability to turn everything to gold that he touched, a story that likely arose from Phrygia's wealth in precious metals, particularly gold. So as we've covered many empires before, many empires have had currency, but gold was really something characteristic specifically to the Phrygian Empire as we've up to this date. As we can see, as we'll discuss later, the content of the slide later, in the top left, the image of King Midas, apparently he touched his daughter and she herself turned to gold. As for expansion and peak prosperity in the 8th to the 6th centuries BCE, starting with expansion under King Gordius and Alyattes, circa 680 to 560 BCE. So following the reign of Midas, Phrygia continued to expand its territory under the leadership of King Gordius and his son Alyattes. Their reigns were characterized by military conquests, which led to the consolidation of Phrygia's power and influence in Anatolia. So you might recognize the name Gordius, which is famous for the Gordius knot. And so this is something that occurred around 333 BCE. So perhaps the most famous episode in Phrygian history is the Gordian knot. According to legend, an oracle prophesied that the person who could unravel the intricate knot tied by King Gordius would become the ruler of Asia. So this is long after his own reign. This knot was supposedly still tied. Alexander the Great, in his campaign to conquer Asia Minor, famously solved the knot by cutting it with his sword. So it sounds pretty intuitive, or perhaps a sign of arrogance even, but nonetheless this was a very key anecdote in history, named after Gordius from Phrygia. As for decline and fragmentation from the 6th to the 4th century BCE, starting with the Persian conquest around 547 BCE. The Phrygian kingdom faced a significant threat from the expanding Persian Empire. In 547 BCE, the Persian king Cyrus the Great defeated Croesus of Lydia, bringing Phrygia under Persian control. Later to the Hellenistic influence, so this is after, supposedly this is the empire was definitively already destroyed here, but I'm still going to cover sort of some of the history that followed in the region. So this is in the 4th to the 2nd centuries BCE. In the wake of Alexander the Great's conquest, Phrygia fell under Hellenic influence. Greek culture, language, and administration began to permeate the region, and Phrygia was eventually absorbed into the Seleucid Empire, a Hellenistic state that controlled much of the former Persian territory. So unfortunately, around 675 BCE, the empire was no more, but it still played a key part in a lot of the politics in the region, particularly the conquests of Alexander the Great and the Persians. Moving to Roman annexation and decline from the 2nd century BCE to the 3rd century CE. And this is during the Roman Empire, after Julius Caesar turned it from a republic to an empire. So Roman rule around 133 BCE. With the defeat of the Seleucids, Phrygia became part of the Roman Republic's expanding territory. It was incorporated into the province of Asia, a prosperous region in the Roman East, and as Rome became an empire, it too was held under Roman yoke. As for cultural contributions and legacy, Phrygia's cultural influence endured even as its political significance waned. The Phrygian language, though eventually supplanted by Greek, left a mark on the region's linguistic landscape. Additionally, the iconic Phrygian cap, a soft conical hat, became a symbol of freedom that was later adopted in the French Revolution. So we'll eventually get to the French Empire, but the French cap, the canonical hat, actually it was a Phrygian cap, so sign of independence. As for decline and abandonment in the 3rd century CE, as the Roman Empire faced increasing internal and external pressures, Phrygia, like many other provinces, experienced a decline in prosperity. towns and cities gradually dwindled, and by the 3rd century CE, the region had been largely abandoned. So quite a significant change from the great empire it was under Gordius, Midas, and Megdon, for example, and then to later eventual absolute decline as it followed the decline of the Roman Empire, which is one of the major inspirations for me in creating this series. I'm following Gibbon's Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire. Thus, the kingdom of Phrygia, with its rich cultural heritage and strategic significance, left an indelible mark on the history of Anatolia. From its legendary kings to its eventual absorption into larger empires, Phrygia's story is one of rise, expansion, and ultimately decline. Today, the remnants of this kingdom serve as a testament to the enduring legacy of the people who once called Phrygia home. So even if maybe it wasn't the greatest or most significant empire of all time, it has been included and played a significant part in some of those largest empires. And in its earliest periods, the great kingdom of Gordius, Midas, and Megdon, it was perhaps one of the greatest empires during its peak years from around 800 BCE to 600 BCE. Now we will move to a specific biography of King Midas of Phrygia, the Golden Ruler. King Midas, the legendary ruler of Phrygia, is perhaps one of the most enduring figures in ancient history. Known for his fabled ability to turn everything he touched into gold, Midas's reign marked a pivotal period in the history of the kingdom of Phrygia. Therefore, we will seek to delve into the life, achievements, and cultural impact of King Midas, shedding the light on his rule and legacy he left behind. Starting with more background on the Phrygian kingdom. So at the time of Midas's birth, Phrygia was a burgeoning Anatolian kingdom. Under the reign of his father, King Gordius, Phrygia had expanded its borders and established itself as a regional power. Midas grew up amidst an atmosphere of growth and prosperity. So unlike some of the other leaders we've covered, he wasn't necessarily the creator of the Phrygian Empire, but he was certainly brought it to perhaps one of its peaks. Moving to his ascension to the throne from 738 to 718 BCE, tragedy struck young Midas when King Gordius passed away unexpectedly. So King Gordius, who famously created the Gordian knot, passed away unexpectedly in 738 BCE. This event thrust the young prince onto the throne at a tender age. Guided by trusted advisors and influenced by his mother, Queen Cybele, Midas embarked on a journey to further strengthen Phrygia. So he became, unlike some of the other leaders, and like some others, he came into power at a younger age. As for his reign, circa 718 to circa 696 BCE, economic prosperity and gold resources, hence his name, the Golden King. One of the most notable aspects of Midas's reign was the flourishing economy. Phrygia was blessed with vast reserves of precious metals, particularly gold, which contributed significantly to the kingdom's wealth and prosperity. Midas recognized the potential of this resource and worked to harness it for the betterment of his realm. So as we covered so far, most of the empires did not predominantly use gold as their major currency, and this is the first one that's really highlighted gold as a key aspect of its economy. As for Phrygian culture and arts, Midas was not only a shrewd ruler, but also a patron of the arts. He fostered an environment of cultural flourishing, inviting poets, musicians, and artists to his court. Phrygian culture experienced a renaissance under Midas's rule, leaving an indelible mark on the artistic heritage of the region. As for his diplomacy and alliances, Midas understood the importance of maintaining strategic alliances in the volatile political landscape of ancient Anatolia. He forged diplomatic ties with neighboring kingdoms, fostering stability and mutual benefit. These alliances bolstered Phrygia's standing in the region and facilitated further economic growth. As for the tale of the Golden Touch, one of the most enduring legends associated with King Midas is the story of his golden touch. According to the myth, Midas was, through a boon granted by the god Dionysus, gained the ability to turn anything he touched into gold. While this tale likely emerged from the kingdom's abundant gold resources, it has become emblematic of Midas's legacy. So in this image in the top left, where he even turns his own daughter into gold, it could it obviously has benefits, but maybe it also could in some ways be some sort of a curse. I don't know if he had the capacity to turn it off. As for the famous Phrygian cap, another enduring symbol of Phrygia associated with King Midas is the Phrygian cap. This soft, conical hat, often depicted as red, became a powerful emblem of freedom and resistance. And perhaps that's even what he's wearing in that image here in the top left, if you can see the slides. It would later be adopted during the French Revolution, serving as a symbol of the revolutionary ideals. As for later Phrygian kings and decline, following Midas's reign, Phrygia continued to prosper, but it eventually faced external pressures, as previously mentioned, from neighboring powers. The kingdom gradually declined, and by the 6th century BCE, it fell under Persian control. Thus, King Midas of Phrygia, with his golden touch and wise rule, left an indelible mark on the annals of history. His reign, characterized by economic prosperity, cultural renaissance, and diplomatic finesse, elevated Phrygia to new heights. Today, the legacy of King Midas endures through the tales of his golden touch, the Gordian knot through his father, and the iconic Phrygian cap, a testament to the enduring impact of this legendary ruler. It's a very, very fascinating leader. Some of the leaders of some of these empires I did not know about before, but this one I certainly did know of, but not in as much detail prior to the research. So we will now discuss the content of the slide. So on the top left, we have that image we previously referenced to. That's King Midas turning his own daughter to gold through his touch. The title I have here is King Midas and the Phrygian Empire, Great Kingdom of Gordius, Midas, and Mygdon. Below that, we have the tomb of King Midas. To the right, we have a temple of Zeus, which is one of the gods they worshipped. Down and to the left of that, we have one of their theaters. It's in Anatolia. To the right, we have a Phrygian soldier and a griffin. It's interesting that the soldier is larger than the griffin. Below that, we have depictions of what the soldiers would have looked like. So it looks quite lightweight, not too heavy armor, and using circular shields. And to the right, we have this mound that is so connected with King Midas. I think it's called the Midas Mound even. I have been to ancient Greece, but this is an the Asian part of Turkey, so I haven't been there, unfortunately, and I'd like to go. My family, unfortunately, did get to go without me. I was in university at the time, but nonetheless, someday I endeavor to go. Especially considering Graham Hancock, who is someone I greatly admire, has also found some fascinating sites of even older dates in this region. Up and to the right of that, we have some famous columns built by the Phrygians. It's very fascinating, the architecture. That the pyramids are very fascinating and great, but to build a column, I think, is even harder to do to last the time because it's got no power of the pyramid. And below that, we have some mythical beasts. I think there's griffins there, and I believe 2 centaurs as well below. So many of the common myths or mythological creatures associated with Greek mythology were understood and worshipped by Phrygia. And Phrygia also played a key role in those, such as the Trojan War, which is maybe as classic of a ancient Greek example one can find. And above that, we have a map of where Phrygia was located. In the yellow, we have the traditional region, and in the orange, we have the expanded region throughout the course of the Phrygian Empire. As for the information, we have significant leader, King Midas, Empire, Phrygia, period, circa 1200 to circa 675 BCE, modern location, Asian Turkey, the Asian part of Turkey, million square kilometers, 0.20, million square miles, 0.08, percent of the world, 0.15, and that is excluding Antarctica, but might want to note that it's some of the most contested territory in all of the world at the time. As you can see, there's Ionia is very close, Thrace is very close, the Persians were also very close as well, Lycia, Lydia. I recommend anyone reads the Thucydides works relating to the war between Athens and Sparta. Really gives a great picture of how all these city-states interacted. Capital city, Gordion, named likely after Gordias. Government, monarchy. Common language, Phrygian, which influenced Greek later. Religion, Phrygian religion, which also seems to have much overlap with Greek religion as well. Population, several hundreds of thousands to a few million. And as I sort of maybe an optimist, I like to think that they did hit a few million during their peak and maybe declined to as little as several thousand, 100,000s in some of their weaker periods. So that is, in my opinion, the very fascinating King Midas and the Phrygian Empire. We will now move to the next empire, and we will discuss King Midas a bit more in a comparison. Okay, as for the rise and fall of the 25th dynasty of Egypt, so it's important to note that it's also referred to as the Nubian dynasty because they came from the Nubian population, or also the Kushite Empire because it was also the pinnacle of the Kushite people. But nonetheless, they ruled over ancient Egypt in what is often called the Third Intermediate Period. So far we have covered the Old Kingdom of Egypt, the Middle Kingdom of Egypt. We have also covered the Hittites, the Hyksos, who ruled over ancient Egypt in the Second Intermediate Period. Then we covered the New Kingdom of Egypt, and this is the 25th dynasty of Egypt, which is considered to cover through the Third Intermediate Period. So I hope you have checked out those episodes on ancient Egypt as well, but if not, if this is your first, also please feel to watch them in reverse order or any order that you fancy. So the 25th dynasty of Egypt, also known as the Nubian dynasty or Kushite Empire, represents a remarkable chapter in the history of ancient Egypt. Originating from the kingdom of Kush in Nubia, these rulers not only successfully reunited Egypt, but also left a lasting impact on the cultural and religious landscape of the Nile Valley. Therefore, we seek to trace the rise and fall of the 25th dynasty, examining its key rulers, military conquests, cultural achievements, and eventual decline. So starting with its background and emergence circa 770 to 712 BCE. With the kingdom of Kush. So the roots of the 25th dynasty can be traced back to the kingdom of Kush, a Nubian civilization located in what is modern-day Sudan. So they came from Sudan. Kush had a long history of interaction with Egypt, including periods of both cooperation and conflicts. But nonetheless, they were not originally from Egypt. So like the Hyksos, who we've also covered in a previous episode, during the Second Intermediate Period of Egypt, I encourage you to check that out as well if you have not already, in which I also pair it with the Hittite Empire. So moving to Piye's conquest, so he's one of the first leaders of the Kushite Empire, or the 25th dynasty of Egypt. So the 25th dynasty was initiated by Piye, also known as Pianki, a powerful Kushite king. So it's important to think of the 25th dynasty as a subset of the Kushite Empire, or the Nubian dynasties. In a series of military campaigns, Piye sought to reunify Egypt, which had become fragmented and weakened by internal strife, as we saw in the decline of the New Kingdom of Egypt. Around 770 BCE, he initiated his conquest of Lower Egypt, ultimately achieving victory and unifying the country. As for the rule of Piye and his successors, 752 to 656 BCE, with the Nubian pharaohs. So Piye and his descendants established themselves as rulers of Egypt, adopting the traditional titles and regalia of Egyptian pharaohs. So they came in to this land and they called themselves pharaohs. They maintained their Nubian identity while embracing and assimilating aspects of Egyptian culture. So some people qualify that an empire must be multicultural. At least this one does satisfy it. As for Shabaka's reign and religious revival, 721 to 707 BCE. Shabaka, Piye's brother and successor, continued the policies of his predecessor. He was a patron of the arts and played a significant role in the revival of traditional Egyptian practices. Shabaka's reign saw a resurgence of temple construction and religious fervor. As for Taharqa's expansion and conflict with Assyria, 690 to 664 BCE. So Taharqa we will have a specific biography of, but we've also covered the Assyrian Empire, and they've also significantly had an influence on all the, or most of the empires we covered, at least in the Middle East and Egyptian areas. So Taharqa, one of the most prominent rulers of the dynasty, expanded the empire's influence both within Egypt and beyond. His reign, however, was marked by conflict with the expanding Assyrian Empire, culminating in a series of military engagements. So some empires in Mesopotamia, and Turkey, and Egypt, and all these regions, either they tried to negotiate with the Assyrians or often defeated by the Assyrians. Some managed to have defeats over the Assyrians, but nonetheless, they've always sort of had a great influence in all of these areas. So as for the Assyrian conquest and Nubian retreat, 664 BCE. In 664 BCE, the Assyrian king Ⲅ𐌏𐌛Δ𐰮���� launched a campaign against Egypt, ultimately resulting in the withdrawal of the Nubian rulers. Taharqa and his successors returned to Nubia, where they continued to rule from Napata. So that is one of the capitals that we have here in the 25th dynasty of Egypt. As for his legacy and cultural contributions of the empire, art and architecture, the 25th dynasty left a significant mark on the artistic and architectural landscape of Egypt. They patronized the construction and decoration of temples, tombs, and monuments, blending Nubian and Egyptian artistic traditions. So it's important to note that even many of the ancient Egyptian sites have been affected by the Nubians. As for religious syncretism, the Nubian rulers maintained a delicate balance between their Nubian heritage and traditional Egyptian religious practices, so they sort of combined the two religions. But to rule over such a region that had such a strong influence of religion historically, I think it was necessary that they incorporated some Egyptian influences. This syncretism was reflected in their inscriptions, religious texts, and temple dedications. As for Nubian influence and later Egyptian dynasties, while the 25th dynasty came to an end, their legacy continued to influence subsequent Egyptian dynasties. Elements of Nubian art, religion, and culture can be observed in the later periods of Egyptian history, as can the influences of the Hyksos, who also ruled over Egypt for a time. As for the decline and successor kingdoms, 656 BCE onwards, the division of the kingdom. After the Assyrian conquest, Egypt experienced a period of political fragmentation. The country was divided among local rulers and foreign powers, including the Persians, Greeks, and Romans. As for the influence on later Nubian kings, the legacy of the 25th dynasty extended beyond Egypt as well, influencing the later Nubian kings of Nobatia, Mukeria, and Alodia, which adopted Christianity and maintained their independence for several centuries. So the Kushites continued, or the Nubians continued to exist even after this. But the reason why we focused on the 25th dynasty of Egypt was this is where they were really an empire. This is where they ruled over Egypt and even battled against the Assyrians, and in some engagements won. Thus, the 25th dynasty of Egypt emerged from the kingdom of Kush, stands as a testament to the complex interplay of cultures and powers in the ancient Nile Valley. These Nubian rulers successfully united Egypt, leaving a lasting impact on its culture, art, and religion. While their distinct rule came to an end, their legacy endured through their contribution to a broader tapestry of Egyptian history. The 25th dynasty remains a fascinating and important chapter of the story of ancient Egypt, so we could not have overlooked this. It was probably one of the most key factors of the third intermediate period of Egypt, and culminates in our fifth video covering ancient Egypt. So of the empires, a lot have been, pardon me, I wasn't zoomed in properly. Hopefully you can now see that. As for Taharqa, the defiant ruler of the 25th dynasty, a specific biography. So Taharqa, the formidable ruler of the 25th dynasty of Egypt, emerged as one of the most significant figures in the annals of ancient Egyptian history. Reigning during a pivotal period, his rule marked the zenith of the Kushite Empire's power and influence over the Nile Valley. Therefore, we will seek to delve into the life, accomplishments, and legacy of Pharaoh Taharqa, exploring his military conquests, architectural achievements and enduring cultural impact, and by doing so, hopefully learn a bit more about the Nubian dynasty, or the 25th dynasty of Egypt. As for his early life and ascension, circa 690 to 664 BCE, that's the time in which he reigned. His birth and lineage: Taharqa was born around 690 BCE, the son of King Pianki, the founder of the 25th dynasty. So his uncle also ruled as well. He hailed from a distinguished line of Nubian rulers and was raised amidst the grandeur of Napata, the empire's capital. So unlike Memphis, which was often the capital of ancient Egypt, they had a new capital, their own homeland. But it would be also interesting to observe that his father was the one who ultimately created or conquered Egypt and created the 25th dynasty. So very important heritage, and his uncle was also a pharaoh. As for the young heir's education, from an early age, Taharqa exhibited intellectual prowess and deep reverence for the Nubian heritage, or his Nubian heritage. Under the tutelage of esteemed scholars and military advisors, he honed his skills of statesmanship, warfare, and governance, all important in the region. As for the dynastic inheritance, Taharqa's ascension to the throne in 690 BCE followed the passing of his predecessor, King Shabitku. As the chosen heir, he embraced the mantle of leadership with a clear vision of expanding the empire's influence. So an ambitious goal or ambitious agenda. As for his reign and military triumphs, starting with the consolidation of power, upon assuming the throne, Taharqa set out to strengthen his empire's political and military standing. He established a network of alliances with neighboring states, solidifying his position as a formidable regional power. So not only through conquest, but also through negotiation, strengthened his kingdom, or his empire. As for the conquest of Egypt, 678 to 674 BCE, one of Taharqa's most notable achievements was his successful military campaign to reunify Egypt. In 678 BCE, he launched an audacious campaign, decisively reclaiming the northern territories and reasserting his authority over the Nile Delta, so solidifying his family's control over the region. As for his diplomacy and alliance building, as previously mentioned, recognizing the importance of strategic partnerships, Taharqa skillfully negotiated alliances with neighboring kingdoms, including Judah and Israel. These diplomatic endeavors bolstered his empire's security and economic prosperity. As for cultural and architectural achievements, his patronage of the arts, Taharqa was a fervent patron of the arts, fostering a cultural renaissance within the empire. He commissioned numerous artistic works, including statues, reliefs, and jewelry, reflecting the distinctive fusion of Nubian and Egyptian artistic styles. So it's important that he didn't just eradicate Egyptian culture, because that might have caused an uprising. As for architectural marvels, Taharqa's reign witnessed the flourishing of architectural endeavors. He embarked on an ambitious building program, erecting temples, palaces, and pyramids throughout the empire. Once again, none, though, as great as in the Old Kingdom of Egypt, which is the Great Pyramid of Giza. So the greatest architectural achievement, in my opinion, was in the Old Kingdom. In Herodotus' history, he notes there was a labyrinth that was even more complex than the Great Pyramid of Egypt, but that also, whether it existed, or there's evidence that it existed, or whether it was greater or not as great as the Great Pyramid of Giza, it still occurred many in the Old Kingdom of Egypt. So it's interesting to note that probably the greatest architectural achievements were in the oldest period in ancient Egypt. Taharqa's reign, notable among these structures was the Grand Temple of Kawa, a testament to his devotion to the god Amun. As for his religious patronage, Taharqa was a devout follower of the Egyptian pantheon, particularly the god Amun. His reign saw a resurgence of religious fervor with an emphasis on temple construction, religious festivals, and offerings to the gods. So it was very important that he appreciated the underlying religion, especially if there were very religious people in Egypt at the time, having worshipped pharaohs for thousands of years. If he completely eradicated it, whether he believed it or not, but I think he did believe in it, it would have really hurt his popularity if he did not. But moving to the conflict with Assyria and decline, 674 to 664 BCE. Taharqa's assertive expansionism drew the ire of the formidable Assyrian Empire, who he covered much of, led by King Esarhaddon. In 674 BCE, Assyrian forces launched a retaliatory campaign culminating in a protracted conflict. So maybe it would have been wise to form negotiations or diplomacy with Assyria rather than trying to fight them, because it only made them angry. But maybe they would have been angry regardless, and it was important for them to take the first strike. As for the Assyrian conquest and Nubian retreat in 664 BCE, in 664 BCE, the Assyrians dealt a decisive blow to Taharqa's empire. The capital city of Thebes fell, compelling Taharqa to withdraw to Napata, where he continued to rule over Nubia and its southern territories. I believe it was perhaps also that he left Napata and moved to Memphis. But I've seen it written both ways, but nonetheless, the capital had to change due to the battles with Assyria. Thus, Taharqa's indomitable spirit and unwavering commitment to his empire left an indelible mark on the history of ancient Egypt and Nubia. His military prowess, architectural achievements, and cultural patronage elevated the Kushite Empire to unprecedented heights. Today, the remnants of Taharqa's reign stand as a testament to his enduring legacy, a legacy that continues to inspire and captivate scholars and admirers of ancient history worldwide. So, we will now discuss the content of the slide, and my apologies for being zoomed out. I had to pause, make some corrections, and then start again at this section, but I forgot to start the slideshow, so my apologies. So, in terms of the top left, we have a statue of Taharqa. To the right of that, so the title is Taharqa and the 25th dynasty of Egypt. Also, it's a subset of the Nubian dynasty or the Kushite Empire, but its pinnacle. Below that, we have the Nuri pyramids. So there's a series of pyramids created by many of the leaders of the Kushite Empire. However, the first and largest was by Taharqa, as we previously covered in the biography. So once again, it's interesting that the greatest and the biggest came from the earliest period. To the right, we have a depiction of one of the battles with the Assyrians. Below that, we have the tomb of Taharqa. And to the right and below, we have the famous Tower of Taharqa, which is something that looks absolutely beautiful and something I'd really like to see. Egypt is probably the place I'd most like to endeavor to visit. Below that, we have Taharqa meeting with a god with a lion's head, showing sort of his appreciation or admiration for religion. To the right, we have one of the great pyramids that they created. And to the right, we have many statues of many of their kings. In fact, and the tallest and the biggest one is that of Taharqa. That's one of my guess. Above that, we have the timeline. So Pa, the first king, who ruled from 747 BCE to 714 BCE. Sheviku, who ruled from 714 BCE to 705 BCE. Shabaka, who ruled from 705 BCE to 690 BCE. Taharqa, who ruled from 690 BCE to 664 BCE. And Tatamani, who ruled from 664 BCE to 656 BCE, with the ultimate decline of the 25th dynasty of Egypt. And above that, we have, in the top right, we have a map of the Kushite Empire at its peak, where you can see they had Memphis. It was one of the capitals at the time, and Napata was also its original capital. But I think Memphis was maybe the more strategic capital, because that was one of the traditional capitals of ancient Egypt. As for the information we have here, significant leader, Taharqa Empire, Kushite period, circa 744 to circa 656 BCE. I note that the Kushite Empire and the Nubian dynasties lasted much longer. However, this was their peak. The million square kilometers of the 25th dynasty of Egypt is 0.50. Million square miles is 0.19%. of the world, 0.37%, which is quite large even compared to many of the other ancient empires we've covered. This excludes Antarctica, but it was also in one of the most contested regions in the world, supposedly, according to the information we have. Capitals, Napata and Memphis. Government, monarchy. Common languages, Egyptian and Meroitic. Meroitic would have been that which came from the Nubian people, and Egyptian was that from those they conquered. religion ancient Egyptian, and I would also add likely their own elements of religion. Population several millions, so one of the larger two in population. So that is Taharqa and the 25th dynasty of Egypt. Now we will go into a comparison between King Midas of the Phrygian Empire and Taharqa of the Kushite Empire to learn a little bit more about maybe lessons that we can apply to our own lives, or I will at least endeavor to apply to my own lives. The reason we do this in the style of Plutarch's Parallel Lives is I think by learning about the differences of people is where we can most perhaps find real-world application. By finding similars, I think there's I do know in Anna Karenina, they say, in the opening lines, all functional families are alike, and all dysfunctional families are dysfunctional for different reasons, to paraphrase it. So nonetheless, maybe by looking at the differences, we can see why maybe they failed in some of their endeavors, because just looking at a perfect person doesn't really teach us as much. So, King Midas of the Phrygia and Pharaoh Taharqa of the 25th dynasty of Egypt were two influential rulers who left indelible marks on the ancient Near East. Despite their distinct geographical and cultural backgrounds, they shared certain similarities in their reigns, such as strong emphasis on religion, impressive architectural achievements, and their roles as patrons of the arts. However, they also faced unique challenges and made distinct contributions to their respective civilizations. Therefore, we will seek to delve into their lives, accomplishments, and legacies of King Midas and Pharaoh Taharqa, shedding light on the parallels and divergences of their defined their rules. As for their backgrounds and early life, started with King Midas of Phrygia. So King Midas of Phrygia, traditionally believed to have reigned from 738 to 696 BCE, hailed from the ancient Anatolian kingdom of Phrygia. He was born into a royal family, the son of King Dordius and Queen Cybele, and grew up in a period of relative prosperity and territorial expansion. So King Gordius was probably the first great king of Phrygia. So very great lineage, but the same, as we shall see, also applied to Taharqa. Taharqa and the 25th dynasty, Pharaoh Taharqa of the 25th dynasty, who ruled from approximately 690 BCE to 664 BCE, so he ruled just slightly after King Midas, was a Nubian king who ascended to the throne of Egypt after a period of Nubian conquest. He was the son of King Pianki, and Queen Abele, and he came from a distinguished line of Nubian rulers. So King Piye was also the first of the 25th dynasty of Egypt. So both of them are the sons of the founding kings of their empires. So both probably the most valuable lineages one could have. But King Piye was the one to create the empire, combining the Kushite, or conquering the Egyptians. But until around Gordius, the Phrygian Empire, although was still prominent, even going back to the time of the Iliad, going back to the Trojan War, it wasn't a definitive great of an empire as it became under the life of Gordius. So I think very similar actually in terms of their early lives and lineage. As for shared background, both Midas and Taharqa inherited their thrones from their fathers, which provided them with a strong foundation for their respective reigns. They are raised in environments of royal privilege, exposing them to the intricacies of governance and responsibilities of rulership from a young age. But King Midas may have had a stronger religious claim. They said he could even turn things to gold. Maybe it was satire. Maybe they did not actually believe it. But based on the art, it seems like they were quite serious about it. Whereas Taharqa, I think, might have had to make a bit more of a sell to call himself pharaoh, not coming from that actual Egyptian lineage. As for religious beliefs and patronage, starting with King Midas of Phrygia. King Midas of Phrygia is often associated with the worship of Phrygian mother goddess Cybele and the god Sabzios. His reign witnessed a notable emphasis on religious practices, with Midas himself being a devout follower of the Phrygian pantheon. As Taharqa of the 25th dynasty, Taharqa was a devout adherent to the Egyptian pantheon, so kind of not necessarily that of his ancestors, with a particular veneration for the god Amun. His reign saw a resurgence of religious fervor, as evidenced by his patronage to temple construction and religious ceremonies. So maybe Taharqa had to do it more so out of necessity, whereas King Midas actually sort of had a stronger claim of religious connection. Therefore, parallel religious influence, both Midas and Taharqa played a crucial roles in the promotion and preservation of their respective religious actions. They acted as patrons, fostering the construction and maintenance of temples, making significant contributions to the religious landscape of their regions. So, as we've mentioned with previous empires, though, supporting religion can create populism within a state, but also maybe even fear amongst enemies. As for their architectural achievements, starting with King Midas of Phrygia, King Midas of Phrygia is credited with the notable architectural endeavors, including the construction of monumental tombs and the enhancement of urban centers. His reign saw a flourishing of architectural projects that reflected his commitment to the prosperity and grandeur of Phrygia. I note maybe one of the most greatest sights is, though, his tomb. I don't know if he, in fact, it was his idea, maybe they constructed it during his lifetime, but nonetheless, I think, as we see, Taharqa's might have been a little relatively more significant in this area. Taharqa's rule witnessed an impressive building program characterized by the construction of temples, pyramids, and palaces. Notable among these structures was the Grand Temple of Kawa, a testament to his dedication to the god Ammon. It's also to note he has the largest pyramid of the chain of pyramids of those pharaohs. But nonetheless, relative to the earlier kingdoms of Egypt, I think it was less impressive. But not less impressive than King Midas. So I would give maybe slight edge to Taharqa for being relatively the greatest in terms of, for example, the Tower of Taharqa. I would say he was perhaps the greatest of the 25th dynasty, but not the greatest within Egypt. Whereas King Midas, I wouldn't say would necessarily even be the greatest within the Phrygian Empire. Maybe the greatest architectural achievement didn't have to do with architecture at all, and maybe it was the knot of Gordius, his father. Therefore, both rulers left behind a lasting architectural legacy that continues to be studied and admired by historians and archaeologists today. Their constructions served not only as physical embodiment of their reigns, but also as expressions of their devotion to their respective deities. So that is something they certainly have in common. Their patronage to the arts. King Midas of Phrygia was a fervent patron of the arts, fostering a cultural renaissance within his kingdom. He committed numerous artistic works, including statues, reliefs, and jewelry, reflecting the distinctive fusion of Nubian and Egyptian art. That should be just a distinctive fusion of the traditions of Anatolia. As for Taharqa of the 25th dynasty, Taharqa's reign was marked by a resurgence of artistic expression, and he encountered the production of sculptures, reliefs, and other artistic forms that reflected the flourishing culture and climate of the empire, making a fusion between Nubian and Egyptian artistic styles. Therefore, both Midas and Taharqa recognized the importance of cultural patronage in solidifying their rule and leaving a lasting legacy. They supported artistic endeavors that celebrated unique cultural identities and respect in their respective kingdoms. So I think important to note is that they both ruled over multicultural states, so it was important to fuse the multiple varieties of arts rather than try to assimilate the other cultures into one. I think that would have caused uprisings. As for their military campaigns and foreign relations, starting with King Midas. So while Midas of Phrygia is not primarily known for military conquests, his reign likely saw territorial expansion and diplomatic endeavors aimed at consolidating Phrygian power in the region. Taharqa, on the other hand, Taharqa's reign was characterized by assertive military campaigns, including the conquest of Egypt and conflicts with the powerful Assyrian Empire. His formidable military prowess played a crucial role in the expansion and defense of the empire, but maybe he taunted the Assyrians too much, so maybe his warfare or his military endeavors or ambitions would cause the downfall of the 25th dynasty of Egypt. So while both rulers engaged in military activities to secure and expand their empires, the nature and extent of their military endeavors were distinct. Taharqa's military campaigns were more prominent and defined by confrontations with formidable regional powers. I would say, to maybe sum up one of the major differences, I think the key defining factor between King Midas is he was really they said he could even turn things into gold. He really strengthened the economy to such a degree and even made gold such a prominent resource. Whereas Taharqa's reign was probably most characterized by his military conquest, but also maybe for the wrong reasons. Maybe it led to the decline of his reign and his descendants, or his dynasty. Thus, King Midas of Phrygia and Pharaoh Taharqa of the 25th dynasty, though separated by geography and culture, shared striking similarities in their approaches to rulership. Both were devoted patrons of the arts, religion, and architecture, leaving behind a rich cultural legacy. While their military roles differed, each ruler made significant contributions to the expansion and prosperity of their respective empires. Today, the remnants of their reigns stand as a testament to their enduring impact on the ancient Near East. So, thank you very much for watching what I found to be two very, very fascinating empires, and if you've been following some of the previous episodes, it's really fascinating to see how these empires sort of connect with the broader pictures, other things, other empires such as Assyria, but also vertically, such as the timeline of ancient Egypt, for example, or the areas of Anatolia and eastern Turkey. Very, very fascinating elements going on here. So, thank you very much. This is Cashcroft TV, and thank you very much for watching this episode of Ages of Empires, and I hope you continue to support. Thank you so much.